Warehouses and oil refineries are on fire, businesses are bankrupt, there is a fuel crisis and a lack of internet. Are these factors enough for the flywheel of social discontent to spin up and sweep away the Kremlin leadership? Most analysts are pessimistic in their forecasts, but the Russian authorities have started to notice that the opposition in the country is indeed gaining popularity. That is precisely why the Kremlin is removing the only anti-war party from the race and throwing opponents behind bars. There is 1 month left until the so-called elections in Russia. Nina Kolomiets measured the protest temperature of Russian society.
1 month until the so-called elections in the Russian Federation.
Yabloko, oh Yabloko. It is just such a wonderful, tasty Yabloko.
The only anti-war party is being crossed off the lists, and activists are being intimidated.
Base, bazaar, 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 bazaar. It is a truly lively, bustling scene.
What are the current sentiments among the Russian electorate, and does the Kremlin intend to do anything about it?
I want to be able to refuel normally. I don't want to wake up without a text message saying unmanned missile threat declared. We went out with Typhon Chick to get some gas.
Russia is rapidly returning to its traditional crafts, for example, horse breeding, since cars are turning from a luxury or a means of transport into stationary scrap metal. Fuel has disappeared from over 70% of gas stations across the country. I had to leave my car in line yesterday at 12 in the afternoon, and there were 200 cars in that line. On the eve of the State Duma elections in the Russian Federation, the aggressor country was hit by another wave of fuel crisis following targeted long-range sanctions by the armed forces of Ukraine. The Kremlin traditionally denies any problems.
There are no consequences from such attacks. There haven't been, and there cannot be.
We have lines lasting an hour, 2 hours.
Can you refuel without any issues?
Diesel and gasoline are both available at every gas station.
It seems the top leadership of the Russian Federation lives in a parallel reality, one created specifically for them. For example, in the regions of Russia that Vladimir Putin visits, gasoline instantly appears at gas stations and at reduced prices too. After the dictator leaves, the fuel disappears just as quickly and the price tags soar back up. And instead of voter loyalty, this causes undisguised irritation.
I just want to ask, how much longer is this going to continue? I have an interesting question.
The Kremlin has demonstratively shut the mouths of all those who are dissatisfied. The Supreme Court of the Russian Federation removed the Yabloko party, the only anti-war force, from the elections.
The story with the Yabloko party was a story of the against all option. And when the Central Election Commission registered the Yabloko party, the Kremlin thought that they would get, as always, 1.5% of the voters' votes. During the very first week of the polling period, the Yabloko party's approval rating saw a significant increase, growing by 6% of the total voters' support. That is, without a doubt, a truly noticeable and impressive figure in the current political climate. Furthermore, it is worth noting that the vast majority of emigrants also expressed their support for Yabloko, which is quite a remarkable trend to observe.
An open protest before elections is an unprecedented case for Russia, experts emphasize.
The repressive machine in Russia, it is working at full capacity. And by the way, it was very telling, the almost simultaneous removal of Yabloko from the elections and the court verdict for one of the leaders of the Yabloko party. Well, the case has been going on since last year. The verdict of the court verdict for Schlossberg, one of the leaders of the Yabloko party, was effectively for criticizing the war. They gave him 11 years. And so this is also a very telling action.
The Yabloko party started gaining 15 to 20% in the polls 2 months before the election, which is a very long time. That is, a party that for the last 20 years has been associated with the weak, and ineffective Russian opposition, suddenly started to look like a frontrunner. Putin, who supposedly controls everything in Russia, is primarily afraid of a popular uprising.
And economists believe that there are currently all the grounds for unrest in Russian society. People's standard of living is falling rapidly. The other day, part of the Russian capital plunged into darkness due to a fire at an electrical substation. Since then, constant network access disruptions have been recorded in Moscow and other regions of the Russian Federation.
The only things that could drive them out into the streets are total shortages of gasoline and internet for the youth and vodka and sausage for the older generation. Right now, there are no funds to support the population. There simply aren't any. The National Wealth Fund, yes, it still has some money left. Well, if you actually count it in dollars, according to my latest calculations, it's about 30 billion. But unfortunately, the national debt is already twice that amount.
The Russians have sensed that something is burning. People are massively withdrawing money from bank accounts. In the first half of August alone, nearly 3 billion euros were withdrawn from banks, writes the Washington Post, citing data from the Russian central bank.
People are withdrawing a lot of money from banks. There is not enough cash. A little more and banks will start to collapse. But when a bank collapses, 1,000 or even tens of thousands of businesses collapse along with it, both small and medium-sized ones.
Those who can are already preparing to leave the country. In recent days, record queues have been recorded at the Verkhny-Lars border crossing, the only land route to Georgia. The previous rush there was at the end of September 2022, when Putin announced mobilization. An intensification of mobilization is quite likely even after this year's elections, our interlocutors are convinced. The head of the Russian Central Election Commission prudently suggests stripping those who leave for so-called unfriendly states of their right to vote.
Left the country?
Betrayed the country? Get out.
Foreign agents can no longer have passive suffrage, that is, they cannot be elected. And quite frankly, we are simply unable to campaign or reach out to other fellow citizens in these so-called elections. It really feels like our hands are tied. And therefore, looking at the current situation and weighing all the various factors involved, I have to admit that today I have not yet made a final concrete decision on how I will proceed. However, I want to be very clear about one thing. If I do eventually decide to go to this, as they often say, voting process at all, I can assure you that I will certainly not spoil the ballot, as I believe it is important to make my voice heard in a meaningful and constructive way.
It seems that leaving Russia will become even more difficult in the future. Cases are already being recorded where citizens are not allowed to leave the country for rather strange reasons. For example, residents of the Perm territory are being denied exit because hogweed is growing on their personal plots. It seems the Kremlin has chosen a tactic of total punishment for its population. And the closer it gets to the so-called elections, the tighter the noose will be drawn. Nina Kolomiec, Podrobnosti, Inter TV channel, Marathon, United News.
At the sites of Russia's logistics centers, as a result of the Ukrainian drone attack on Wildberries warehouses in Koledino, goods worth tens of billions of rubles were burned. Russian entrepreneurs are already declaring bankruptcy, employees are looking for new jobs, and economists warn the consequences of the strikes may be felt not only by sellers, but also by banks, and indeed the entire Russian economy.
I honestly don't know about you, but personally for me, it is genuinely painful to sit here and watch this unfold, especially when such a massive historic empire is slowly falling apart right before our very eyes.
One of the largest Wildberries warehouses near Moscow in Koledino is turning into a burnt-out ruin after being attacked by Ukrainian FPV drones earlier this week.
It was an important logistics hub for the company, covering an area of 250,000 square meters in the Koledino Industrial Park near Moscow.
In this fire alone, according to rough estimates, goods worth 78 billion rubles were burned. And Russian private entrepreneurs are already openly saying that they have gone bankrupt, complaining about meager compensation and the lack of payments for goods that had already been sold.
I really hope that some kind of normal, adequate support will come, because the support that is currently available from Wildberries and the state is negligible.
Attacks on the Wildberries marketplace warehouses have been ongoing since July 18th. The Ukrainian side has repeatedly provided evidence. This is a platform for trading military-purpose goods. Wildberries has removed the Everything for the Special Military Operations section from its website. However, the military equipment itself has not disappeared from sale, and therefore the strikes continue. In total, Ukrainian drones have visited 22 Wildberries warehouses, some of them multiple times. The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine reported that 7 out of the 10 largest logistics centers have been disabled. This one near St. Petersburg is now completely destroyed.
Right now, there are absolutely telling videos where a person is driving and filming that on one side,
a Wildberries warehouse is burning, and on the other side there is a long line for fuel. In other words, this is a clear and undeniable demonstration that this ongoing war, which was started by Russia, brings absolutely nothing good or positive to the Russian people themselves. It is a conflict that offers no benefits to them at all.
The total losses for both the marketplace itself and the sellers are estimated at tens of billions of rubles. And this is financial pressure not only on the company that trades goods for the war, but also on the Russian banking system.
And in essence, this is a dual-purpose blow to the sellers themselves who lost their goods and to the banks that provided loans, specifically VTB Bank and Sberbank. And that's why Russians there need to think about withdrawing their funds from these banks, because their financial condition has deteriorated quite significantly. And VTB Bank was already on the verge of bankruptcy anyway.
Another effect of the strikes is the risk of unemployment. Couriers and managers were the first to be laid off. Videos are already appearing online showing warehouse workers throwing their uniforms into the trash or moving away in search of other work.
Well, here we are, packing in a hurry. It seems like absolutely everything is being thrown out, and there is really nothing left for us to salvage here.
Economist Alexander Savchenko predicts that about 100,000 workers in Russia could lose their jobs. And although, according to him, this will not cause significant damage to the Russian economy combined with other factors, it could have a noticeable impact.
1% of GDP in Russia is about $25 billion. Even today, if everything stops for Wildberries, that's a loss of about 1% of GDP. You see, I estimate the contribution of all Western sanctions at 0.5% of GDP per year, 0.5%. And here, one blow is 1%.
There are almost no Wildberries centers left in Russia that haven't been hit by drones of justice. The question arises, what's next? It seems the answer didn't take long. A few days ago, during an attack on Moscow, OSINT analysts reported a strike on an Ozon warehouse, the second largest marketplace in Russia. Officially, this data has not yet been confirmed, but investors have already reacted to the risks. The company's shares have dropped in price. Veronika Ivashchenko, Podrobnosti, Inter TV channel, United News Marathon.